Okay, we're live and good to go. Yeah, first of all, to everyone who's listening, things didn't work out last week. We solved that problem at least. Pastor Locke was at least uh, as good to say, let's do this on Monday, so not a long time waiting, and that's something I really appreciate because that's, yeah, I can't look at your schedule, so I don't know what's possible. So I really appreciate you doing this on such a short notice. Um, for the people who might not know you, can you do a very brief introduction?
Yeah, I'm Greg Locke, and I pastor just outside of Nashville, Tennessee, a little town called Mount Juliet. It's called Global Vision Bible Church. And I've been here this November will be 11 years. I started the church in my hometown after 10 years of traveling really all over the world and kind of revival work, evangelism. And I've been married for 21 years. I've got 4 kids. And most of the opportunities that I get like this, which I very much appreciate, come because of Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, social media, or YouTube page or something like that. So again, as I was telling Peter, before we kind of went live, I really appreciate him having me on the program because this is a great way to dialogue. It really helps you to get into the heart and mind of people that perhaps you 100% don't agree with. But at the end of the day, disagreement doesn't make us enemies. It makes us human. And so I really appreciate the opportunity to have this to share, answer questions, whatever I can do.
Okay, yeah, and you're welcome here because, yeah, as I told you, what we try to do is at least get the conversation going and maybe try to reduce animosity a little because
Sure.
things can get heated on Twitter and on Facebook. So we don't have the usual questions because I think that go and Google you and go on YouTube. Most of the questions have already been asked, so
Sure.
we could rehash everything, but it would be a waste of your time and maybe of ours as well because there's no use in asking a question you already know the answer to. So I'll start off with the question, which I think is the best to start off with. The moment you hear the person you're speaking to is an atheist, what's the first internal reaction you usually notice yourself?
It's never been hostility or anger. I mean, I think doubt is something that's very natural for a lot of people. And there's a lot of things to doubt in the day and age in which we live. And so I've never had an angry, forceful type of an attitude towards atheism. Again, I think that we're coming at things from 2 different worldviews. There's no doubt about that. And so where we begin is going to massively change the trajectory of where we end up, at least in my worldview. And so I don't hate atheists. Matter of fact, when I had the chance, last year and a half ago, to speak with the godless engineer, we've developed a very decent friendship, and he's been to a couple of my meetings, and we've talked about coming back on the program, and even him having come here to our church. And so, I've developed a kindred spirit with some of these folks because I think what needs to happen in meetings like this is that people need to see the other side. I'll be the first to tell you that sometimes because of my Facebook platform and the abrasiveness of it, the rantiness of it, from a 3 to 5 minute video clip, you can think, man, this guy's a colossal jerk. He hates everybody. He's against everything. And he's using God, just to justify bigotry or whatever. And so I think it's good to get the other side, because I am a husband. I am a father. I am a pastor of deeply broken, mismanaged, hurting people. And so it's almost like there is the Facebook, Twitter, Greg Locke platform. And then there's the reality of who I am in real life. I'm just a down-to-earth guy that works with a lot of broken, addicted, homeless, hurting people. And so when you say to me atheism, I say to you, I have a lot of friends that doubt, a lot of friends that are atheistic, and some friends that are antagonistic towards the gospel and the things of Christ. But that doesn't change who we are as people. That doesn't change my responsibility to love people and be compassionate and kind. So I kind of hope that answers the question a little bit. But when I hear atheism, I'm not like, oh, angry and mad and want to come out fighting.
Okay, but
right, that actually answers.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just saying, that actually answers a couple of the questions that we had. it's always good for everybody from both sides to remember that you are not Christianity. We are not atheism. You are a Christian who has different facets to your entire life. As you said, a husband, a father of 4 kids, a friend, somebody who may or may not like coffee. I love coffee.
Me too.
I like so many different types of coffee creamers. I could discuss those for hours. No, well, probably not. But, you know, we have so many issues on Twitter with talking to people who encounter, well, I mean, since I'm close to the topic, encounter, say, an atheist and assume that when they're talking to me, they're talking to atheism.
Right.
And that's simply not the reality.
Oh, you're very right.
So I guess my question would be, why do you think there's such a difference in conversation when we're, any of us are speaking face-to-face and when we're on Twitter and Facebook? Why is there such a disconnect between our actual personas and what we present to other people who might be on a different side of the aisle in, you know, this kind of battle of worldviews?
Sure. Well, like Peter said, you know, you can't read tone in a text or in 140 characters. And, you know, you can get a little bit more of it out of a Facebook video, especially if I'm pretty amped up and pretty charged up and, you know, super convicted about what I'm saying. But again, it's so difficult. You know, like when I'm doing marriage counseling, for example, I tell husbands and wives, you cannot communicate via text message and fix a problem. You just can't. You cannot fix your marriage. You can't be a better husband, a better wife, a better parent over text message. And people, you know, we've raised a generation of young people, you know, because of selfies and YouTube and, you know, Snapchat and all of this. They think that they can handle problems and they can relay messages through text, through the internet. And you can't, because you can't read people's tone. You can't read people's attitude. You can't read between the lines. The problem is we try to read between the lines. And because of that, now everybody gets their feelings hurt. Everybody gets upset because you can type out one thing. But what I found is sometimes we'll be bold and abrasive and we'll type out one thing. But when we get face to face with somebody in a Panera Bread or a Dunkin' Donuts or a Starbucks, we might back off just a little bit, because when you're in somebody's face and you're really talking to them and you can see their eyes and you can see into their life a little bit and you can see their facial expressions and their hand motions, it kind of changes the dynamic of the conversation. So that's why I think video chatting like this is very important, because almost 100 times out of 100, when I have met with people that I severely disagree with, whether it's politically or religiously or economically, whatever, on Twitter or really on Facebook, that's the bigger platform. Twitter for me is a little bit more politically supercharged. But when I meet these people, and sometimes I'll go out of my way to meet them, it's almost conclusively, they're like, oh, wow, you know, we're kind of taken aback that, you know, you're not this, your back's against the rope, you know, jerk Christian, jerk for Jesus type of a guy that sometimes we can have a persona of being. And so I'm just as guilty as the next person. And so, yeah, I think there is a major, major disconnect. That's why one of the things our church is trying to do is we're trying to get some relatively well-known atheists to come to our church so that we can host them and me and, you know, some of our staff and some of our pastors and have a civil dialogue like this. Not necessarily a debate. We could go back and forth, proof, lack of proof. We could do that for hours, for eons. But at the end of the day, when we're in the same room with each other and we understand that we do have brokenness and we do have differences and we do have backgrounds and everybody has a story behind the eyeballs, I think that changes the dynamic of the conversation. Because when you start with something like this, you're like, oh, what am I going to say? What questions are they going to throw at me? Are they going to be abrasive? Whatever. It's very easy to type that kind of stuff out. But when we're looking camera to camera, eyeball to eyeball, you know, you want to be a little less abrasive.
Can I jump in? Can I jump in on that?
Please do. Yeah.
You said a famous atheist. Would you be up for me trying to set up a conversation between you and the famous atheist? Because
Certainly.
I think I could do that.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I'd be glad to.
I think I know the one you have in mind.
You know, there's been times I've went kind of back and forth with people on Twitter and stuff like that. And, you know, but yeah, I mean, I would be glad to. I'm not the sum total of truth and I don't have all the answers, but, you know, I'm pretty solid and founded in what I do believe. And I love that type of dialogue. And again, some people think, oh, a debate, it's just a waste of time. All you're going to do is scream and cuss at each other. No, not if it's done right. Not if it's handled properly. You can disagree and you can, you know, come to terms with, you know what, we may not be able to fix each other's differences, but let's state what those differences are. Let's say, why do I believe in Christ? Why do I believe in the gospel? Why are you coming at what you believe? Everybody's got a reason. Everybody's got a bubble on the balance, if you will, that brings them to why they believe what they believe. So yeah, I'd be glad to do that.
I agree. I'll try to set it up. I can't promise it, but at least I'll do my very best to
Sure.
set it up.
If it's the one I'm thinking of, he might still be recovering from that last one.
He might, but I think if someone was to debate Pastor Locke, at least we should find someone who is, let's say, as animated and as well known in his knowledge as Pastor Locke is in his. So I think we can try to arrange that. But my question would be, I've seen a couple of interviews with you. I've seen the one with the Godless Engineer, and I've also seen the other one you did. I don't remember his name. It was last year, the guy with the fish tank, where you thought that he was sitting in front of the fish tank.
Oh, yes,
actually a green screen.
Yes.
So, but if I look at your videos on Facebook, and those are so different. Those are two completely different people.
Yeah, you're right.
Why do you think is that? Because you're a very nice guy in a personal talk, and you come across as being that aggressive sometimes in a Facebook post.
Sure. And it's interesting because really our Facebook ministry kind of organically grew. I was just doing very small little snippet videos a few years ago for our church folk, and it just kind of blew up when some hot button issues would take place. I thought, oh, let me try my hand at this, do a little rant. And so I did, and it blew up inevitably. And so what I found is that when you do hit these hot button issues, and I know what's going to really go viral and what's not going to go viral, and, what's going to be more on the devotional level. And so I have to be careful with that because, when you have, 1.2 million followers, that really is a lot of power. That's a lot of responsibility, and you can blow your face off and you can hurt a lot of people. And so there's been times our staff has said, hey, pull that video. That was stupid. That was, you kind of came off half cocked. That didn't sound right. And I know that to the average person, especially someone that is to the left of me politically or, far away from me religiously, I'm like some inbred, hillbilly, redneck, uneducated guy that's never read a book 2 days in his life except for the Bible. But when you do get in a conversation like this, it does change the dynamic because they're not two Greg Locks, but there really are two different platforms. Because the purpose of our Facebook is to really punch hard at cultural issues, at things that are hot buttons that are getting people's attention. And I know it gets the numbers up, it gets the followers, people log on, they find that. But here's what happens. Almost 100 times out of 100, if somebody consistently follows Pastor Greg Locke, they get onto our live stream. And then they're watching me Wednesday nights. And I preach 4 times every weekend, the same message because of the crowds. But I preach 4 times, and they're following our live stream. They're finding out where I'm going to be, and they'll come and hear me speak. And so they're getting the long messages. They're getting the 30, 35, 45-hour presentations when I'm going to these various churches and venues and civic centers and teaching and preaching the Bible. But it was a 2 or 3 or 4 minute, ooh, man, that made me mad type of video that kind of got them into it. And so I am well aware of the fact that there can seem to be a disconnect, but it's almost purposeful at this moment. It happened accidentally, really. But I found that when I am forceful, and I do preach forcefully, but I'm really not that much of a jerk. I mean, people really do like me. I mean, we really do have a lot of, people would think that, homosexuals never come to our church and, that we don't care anything about anybody that's different from us. When if you come to our church, I'm telling you, it is the most diverse group of people you've ever seen a day in your life. We have a little tiny church building. People think I got this big mega church, and we may have a mega platform on social media. We have a little tiny church, but it looks like a wedding chapel. It seats like 210 people, tight as can be. And we're running 900 people on the weekends because we just have to keep having multiple services. That's why I preach the same sermon. And so people are coming from all over. But here's what our church is known. Our church is known by our little tagline, where broken people find new meaning to life. I grew up around addiction all my life, struggled with it for years. But my father, he'd been in and out of prison. He struggled with addiction for years. And so I have an affinity for people that are broken, heroin addicts, crack addicts, meth addicts, the homeless. We have a huge outreach to the homeless. But I mean, just to hear me get up and, rant on Target and transgender bathrooms, people would be like, man, this guy's a colossal jerk. You don't know what he's talking about. But you don't realize that we really do reach out to the LGBTQ crowd. I mean, yeah, they know that we're against that lifestyle. But I tell people that acceptance and approval are two very different things. I have a responsibility to accept everybody. I don't care what their lifestyle choice is. That doesn't mean I have to approve. Okay, and I'm going to preach what I believe, from a biblical standpoint is moral and valuable. But it's almost 100% of the time that when people actually sit down with me, they're like, you know what? I kind of can't help but like this guy. And because he's not really that much of a jerk. And so you're right. And it's very hard to explain the dichotomy of it, but there really are two different platforms. There is the ranty ravey, that cranks up everybody on Facebook and Twitter and gets them all fired up. But then again, that puts them into finding out who this guy really is, because I can't preach a 45-minute sermon verse by verse and line by line, which is, that's what I'm known for. I just preach right through books of the Bible, try to keep as much opinion out of it. But that is not how I do it on Facebook or Twitter. And that's by design. It is much more quick, ranty, to the point, bam, 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 stir everybody up and just leave type of deal.
Well, I at least would say it gets a little bit more attention if you do it that way. And well, which brings me actually to the next question that I have to ask, because when the moment Ty confirmed the initial conversation, I sent that out to my followers, and people started throwing questions at me.
Sure.
And I have to say, there's one question that's stuck out, because I don't know why, but they just want to know it.
Sure.
And I think it just came by in the chat tonight as well, because a lot of people consider you a good-looking guy. And do you think that makes you more successful in what you do?
Do I think it makes me more successful?
Someone, a lot of them asked if it made you more successful with the women in your church. But I know that a lot of gay people come as well, so that could be even men and women. So I don't know, but what do you think?
I've never really thought of it from a looks perspective. I have changed my hair as of recent, simply because I've got so much gray. And but usually everywhere I go, people will be like, "Man, we thought you were so much taller. We thought you were so much bigger." I'm just this little bitty almost 5'8" guy, just a little tiny 150 pounds soaking wet. And so I really don't have a whole lot going for me looks wise or style wise or anything like that. So I don't know. I mean, if somebody thinks I look decent, that's cool. I mean, I try to dress, as nicely as I can or whatever. But let me say this while I'm thinking about it, because it will kind of help add to that question. Whether people think I look nice or not, I do want to, look successful, I suppose, whatever. But my wife thinks I'm hot, and so that's really all that matters at the end of the day. But I do want to say this. One of the things I want to distance myself from, and that's why I appreciate conversations like this, because it helps me do it. It's very difficult for me to do it on Twitter. One of the things I hate, people are like, why do you always respond when somebody says something about finances or about, riches or whatever? And the reason is I want to distance myself from those pastors, because I preach just as strongly against that prosperity nonsense as you would hear me preach against transgender bathrooms.
I saw your video against Joel
Osteen.
Joel Osteen.
I think everybody automatically assumes that I'm wearing a Rolex watch and I'm driving around a Maserati and I've got this $1 million mansion. I just make a little simple meager paycheck like everybody else. We don't have health insurance, and so I want people to know that. To me, it's not about the stylistically. It's not about the riches. It really is. I mean, I know it sounds very cliche, but I'm telling you, ever get to know Greg Locke, it really is with us about giving. I mean, we just went to Houston. That's why we had to forego the first time. I mean, we raised $50,000 in 2 days, and we took every bit of it down there. We blessed people we didn't even know, and we helped everybody we could. We just gave $60,000 away not long ago. And our church, we're not rich. We don't have that kind of money. We're just simple, down to earth, broken folks. But I want people to know that that's what I distance myself from. I'm not involved in that. I'm not in the ministry for money. I don't care about that. It's fun to have Facebook followers and to meet people all over the world. But when they meet me, they're like, man, this cat is really he's really just a hillbilly. He's just really down to earth. And, we would disagree as to where that comes from. To me, I'm like, this is the blessing of the Lord. I mean, he really is opening some major opportunities and giving me a voice. And people are hungry for some common sense, and they just want somebody, even a preacher, even people that don't appreciate what the guy says, the reason it's so successful is people are sick and tired of these preachers that just dance around the issues and are afraid to say anything. I mean, if you're going to believe it, you might as well stand up for it. If you're going to live for it, you might as well be willing to die for it, right? So as far as the looks are concerned, I don't know. I like my little goatee and my little beard, but other than that, I just want to make sure that I'm distanced from these, you know, suit and tie, you know, everything's got to be all perfect, because it's not. The ministry is not perfection. And if I was in it for a paycheck, I'd go sell cars or be a motivational speaker, because I'm a pretty good communicator and I can think pretty quick on my feet, but I just love people and I love what I do and it's fun and I enjoy it. So I hope that answers the looker question.
Well, I mean, I'm just thinking of all the stumbling blocks to your sisters in Christ that this video might bring, because we're affected by things other than men. You know, we're affected by things that men aren't, perhaps. You know,
Sure.
Men talk about, you know, skin tight clothing on the women, showing
Right.
off our curves, our huge tracts of land.
I understand.
But ours, a lot of times, I can't speak for all women, obviously.
Right.
But from a cisgender heterosexual woman type of point of view, a lot of times it's the suits that show off the breadth of the shoulders, the trim waists, the authoritative click of the heels, the long authoritative strides, that little bit of swagger when he walks into a room, that sort of thing. It
Sure.
can just set us on fire. So, you know, guys want to tell us what to wear and what not to wear, and many of us are thinking, what about you guys? You guys are in amazing looking suits, and it's a good thing that we don't show our the physiological symptoms of our attraction like men do, because we'd just be showing all over the place. But kind of changing topics, because that got a little bit awkward, I apologize.
Sure. I got you.
When it comes to communication and the difference between the Facebook and Twitter platforms and short videos that get people so fired up, and your video conversations, I kind of want to talk about the contrast between those for just a second. And sometimes, you know, the short vids can get people fired up, as you say, but they can also be genuinely hurtful. And you know, you talk about basically the two different Greg Locks. And if you could choose which one people see you as, which one would it be? If you had to choose, which one would it be?
If it could only be one or the other, right?
Right.
Well, I think in some ways, even on the Facebook, like if you look through it right now, let's say you go through the last 20 videos, there'll probably be 9 of them, you know, maybe half of them, maybe 10 of them that'll be super amped up, controversial, but the rest of them really won't. The rest of them will be videos like this. You know, now obviously I'm catering to a Christian audience because the page is called Pastor Greg Locke. And there's times, I mean, obviously I'll rant on atheism and stuff like that, but they really do get to see that sometimes. But I don't think that the bulk of the people that are getting on there are getting on there for that. A lot of them really are getting on for the controversial sake of it. You know, my grandfather used to say, if you're not making anybody mad, you're not making any waves, and you're not, nobody's paying attention to you. And so that's ingrained in me just a little bit. And so I understand, you know, the hurtful part, because there have been times that I've pulled videos that I thought, you know, but at the end of the day, I am a very forceful person. I mean, if we sat down in public, you know, I would still tell you the same things that I tell you in the video. They may just come out a little bit differently because of the context. Because again, you're just clicking on it. Who is this guy? You know, what is this guy? And all of a sudden, boom, 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 boom. You know, I'm talking about whatever, you know, Planned Parenthood. I'm fighting them, or flying to Washington and taking all their letters back, and, you know, or, you know, punching back against Richard Dawkins or something like that, you know. And so I can understand where people will think this guy has lost his mind. This guy is crazy. But I try to balance it with more of the devotional, the little more kind, faith-filled, you know, loving type stuff that still has, you know, somewhat of substance and character and, you know, helpfulness. I want to comfort people as much as I want to convict people. But so I don't know. I mean, if I just had to choose, if I had to say I could never do any other videos again, I mean, I want to be myself at the end of the day. But I mean, I do want people to see that, you know, there's a guy that I really do care about people, but I'm not going to compromise my convictions. I'm not going to roll over to the culture. I mean, there are some things that I morally stand against, and there are some things that I think that I have to stand against. But again, I want to be kind. You know, the Bible says, speak the truth in love. It doesn't tell me to speak love. It tells me to speak truth, but make sure I do it in a loving, kind way. And like I said a few moments ago, I tell our people, you know, it's okay to be bold. Just don't be belligerent. right? Jerks for Jesus is not a legitimate ministry. We are not a Westboro Baptist church. Those people are jerks. Okay, I don't have anything to do with these picketing, crazy, rioting. For example, when I rescheduled this for today, I was invited, and it's only about 35 or 40 minutes. The news is there. I knew it would be a huge thing for the page, but they're like, hey, would you come and speak? We're having this rally. The drag queens are coming through, and the mayor's trying to vote them out. And I knew that would be a huge fiasco. But you know what? There's sometimes I just don't want to, I'm not going up there. I don't want to walk into controversy, because I don't always want to be known as the guy that just preaches against Target and transgender bathrooms and gay people. You know, I don't want to be just known as that guy. And so I think sometimes one or two videos can go very, very big, and that's all people know me as. And I'll be honest. I mean, there's sometimes that, you know, I can stoke the fire a little bit. Depends on what kind of mood I'm in, or what's kind of going on, or what I'm preaching on at
right.
church.
I guess where I'm coming from is from, I mean, there's another group of people whose perspective we have to take into account, and those are the people who have been traumatized by spiritual abuse. And
Right.
they're the ones who are used to abuse being in the context of loving words, loving phrases, loving tones of voice.
Right.
It's basically as if, you know, there are some people who have experienced, say, marital rape, but it was still in the context of just this horrible honey tone of voice, and the most horrid things are being done to you.
Sure.
So on one hand, I understand the importance of context. On the other hand, sometimes putting something that to a certain person is, you know, is why they were diagnosed with PTSD, putting them back into the context of the supposed, I say supposed here because that's how a person in that situation will look at it. The supposed love, the supposed consideration, you know, speaking truth in love in their experience was being abusive and calling it love.
Right.
And so I'm wondering what you say to these people who you would otherwise have watch your videos, but they would actually be brought flashbacks. They would start experiencing tremors. They would start spontaneously crying. They would, you know, they would have these visceral reactions because of what they experienced. And a person like that would not be unique. There are so many people who have experienced this, and I'm wondering about your thoughts on that and what these videos may cause with them.
Well, first of all, I'm going to be careful, because I mean, obviously the internet's big, so it's very difficult for me to know whoever is going to be, you know, watching the videos, viewing the videos. And that, again, that's why I really try to have a healthy balance. When you talk about PTSD, you know, it wasn't very long ago I did a huge interview and several, you know, follow-up videos on my personal struggle as a pastor with deep levels of depression. And that has reached a genre of people that probably aren't going to be very concerned about my stand on Planned Parenthood or whatever the case may be. But they really resonate. And we get letters, and we get calls, and we get emails by the thousands. I mean, literally by the thousands every single week, of people that are like, hey, you know what? I really don't believe a lot of the stuff that you say, but I appreciate your authenticity. I appreciate the fact that you're straightforward, but I also appreciate the fact that you're hard on yourself, and you're just as hard on the church world as you are on the non-church world. Because interestingly enough, I came out of a deep level of spiritual abuse, even as a very young pastor. I'm 41 now, but before I started the church, when I was 30, I traveled in evangelism for a lot of years. And I not worked for an organization, but the churches that I was in was a very, coming up, was a very strict, forceful, down your throat, abusive, spiritually abusive. And I had a lot of that. When I started to come out of it, and my wife, even more so, she's 5 years older than I, she grew up in that, what I call the fundy bubble. And it was very difficult. It was very straining on our marriage, even on those early days when I started to come out and realize the hypocrisy of some of the people in the church, and how that condescending tone, I thought the whole time, was just, you know, they were being so kind and loving, but man, they were just stabbing you in the back. And it was very hurtful. As a young preacher, it was almost the demise of my entire ministry. I thought, man, I'm done with it. This is stupid. If it's the way church people are going to act, especially people that I'm preaching to, that I'm supposed to be ministering with. And so I went through some very, very deep levels of of doubt and just frustration, confusion. And I was
Right. And
hurt.
I think a lot of people can identify with you on that.
Yep.
And so I wonder when, people who are in this boat or have been in this boat, and they see your videos and they get, riled up or hurt, or, triggered. And I don't say this in the sense of being a snowflake, but in the sense of being a legitimate victim, somebody who is officially diagnosed with PTSD. How would you de-escalate that? If they've seen something on there that you came off, as you said, deliberately forceful, how do you pair that with the knowledge that
I think
are going to get hurt? Are they collateral?
Sure. I think deliberately forceful is maybe broad stroking, because when I'm deliberately forceful, it's to an audience of all. And again, individually, I mean, if those people are reaching out to me individually, we are talking through some of this. I mean, we have somebody that answers all the emails, all the phone calls, gets me the ones that are like detrimental. Hey, right now, you really need to call these people. They're hurt, whatever the case may be. And so I would very much take that into consideration. But it's like me preaching on Sunday. I don't know of the 4 services, of the 900 people that are there. I'm going to preach what's in the text. I call it same bat time, same bat channel preaching. I'm just going to preach what comes next. I don't skip around. I don't dance around it. I don't really know who's going to be there other than our normal folks that come on a very regular basis, but we have visitors from all over the world every single service. And so I don't know how they're going to take it. I don't know. And I'm not going to backpedal because I'm thinking to myself, oh my goodness, they might get mad. They might get upset. They might get offended, because somebody's always going to get offended about something. And my purpose is not just to be naturally offensive. My purpose is to state the case. And in stating the case, there's obviously going to be some people that are hurt and offended. But if I know about it, on a connected personal basis, I'm going to do everything I can to talk to that person, kind of explain my position with that person, because I know a lot about spiritual abuse, and I know what that can do to people. And, listen, I'll be the first to tell you, as a pastor, there is no hurt in the world like church hurt. And when you've been hurt in a church, that can push you away for a long time or forever. And it nearly destroyed me, and even in my preaching and my ability and my desire and my calling, because people can get hurt. And so I'm not the sum total of truth. I don't know if I have all of those answers. I just know I'm me. I'm a very forceful type person, but I try to tone that down as much as I possibly can outside of the videos, so that people can see the reality of my heart and who I am. And I don't hate people. Yeah, there's things I don't like, but I don't hate people. I'm not a bigot. I'm not a racist. I love people of all creeds and all colors. And really, to be honest, I mean, if we were really to boil the whole thing down, there's really only 3 areas where I've ever at all been abrasive on any of my videos, other than there have been times that I've punched, back at atheism, and that's really kind of a back and forth thing.
Well, I mean, punching at atheism, that's different than punching at an atheist. So,
Yes.
I mean, we're among those who say, you can target an ideology or a thought without targeting the person, because while a person deserves, every person deserves the respect, but the ideas are not people. Ideas themselves don't deserve respect.
And I think sometimes I get a bum rap, because I really do speak more against ideologies, because the only 3 areas that people are going to say, oh, he's abrasive, will be the transgender or the LGBT, Planned Parenthood, and Islam. That's it. Radical Islam. I'm against people using God to blow people up, in any denomination, in any religion for that matter. And so when I speak against radical Islam, they're like, oh my goodness, but I mean, I preach against the Pope too. I preach against man-made Catholicism and some of the nonsense that's involved in all of that. And so I try to have a good, healthy balance. But the only abrasiveness that people ever get is when I'm speaking about LGBTQ rights, Planned Parenthood, and radical Islam. That's it. I can't think of any other thing. And everybody thinks I'm this raving, loving Trump supporter, and I'd do anything Trump. I've never met Trump, for one thing, and Trump doesn't know this little peon of a hillbilly preacher. But I've got my issues with Trump. I voted for Trump. I've made that known in videos. I didn't think we had another choice. And but there's some things about Trump I'm not happy about. I certainly don't stand up and say, oh, Trump is a Bible-believing Christian. I think Trump surrounded himself with some Bible-believing Christians, but I don't think Trump's on that journey yet. You know, I'm not willing to get up and say, oh, Trump is this Bible-believing individual full of morality. No, he's not. He's full of a bunch of nonsense. He needs to go to bed at 3 o'clock in the morning, quit tweeting and hurting everybody's feelings. And so, because he is the leader of the free world. And so, you know, I'm not this guy that's just bowing down and loving Donald Trump. But that's what people on Facebook would paint me as. Oh, that's all you are. You're a conservative Trump lover. I'm conservative to the core, but when Donald Trump, yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and prophesy this right now. When Donald Trump does stupid stuff, Greg Locke's gonna do a video about it. I don't care if it's Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. Okay, nobody's off limits when it comes to standing up for what I believe. Okay, so let's be balanced about it.
I invented, I think, I hope, the meme, which is a video meme.
A video meme.
Yes, it could be that I'm using a little piece of what you just said as a video meme, because you just said something that I would have said about Trump. So I think I'll be using that.
Go ahead.
But I have another question that would I think follow up on all of this. When you meet someone, and could be an atheist, if you feel some kind of tension, do you have a way to relieve that tension? Do you have a method to relieve that tension? Do you even want to relieve the tension? What do you do?
I guess it depends on if I know about the tension maybe before going into the conversation, such as like when the Godless Engineer, when he's come to a couple of my meetings, you know, I knew he was coming. We tweeted each other back and forth, you know, much like we did. And from both of us, man, it was very, very kind. I mean, I came around the corner, and I mean, he hugged me. I hugged him. Last time I met him and his wife and his family, you know, and it was really a great meeting. And so I'm not a guy. The strange thing about Greg Locke is I'm a typical type A guy. I'm very big in public personality. I like to preach. I like to communicate. I like to do stuff like this. But at the end of the day, when I don't have a microphone in front of my face, I'm really not a communicator. I don't like.
You're not big. You're 5'8".
What's that?
You're not big. You're 5'8".
Yes, exactly. And I don't like talking, you know. So in public, I talk a lot, you know, I use big hand motions. That's just who I am as a communicator. But when I go home, I've kind of used up all my words for the day, talking with folks, praying with folks, you know, doing interviews. And so I'm really not a very expressive. When I'm standing in these meet and greet lines, you know, sometimes they're longer, hours longer than the services themselves that I'm conducting, because people just love these silly videos. And so they're driving from all over the place just to meet me. And to me, I mean, that's extraordinarily humbling that these people would come that far to meet me. Who am I?
Yeah, but what I was actually pointing to is when you meet someone in spur of the moment, and you might run into someone who maybe saw one of your videos.
Sure. Oh, I get that a lot. Yeah. Like, so when somebody says, hey, I watch your videos, you know, what's my default mechanism? I usually just thank them. I'm just like, hey, thanks. You know, those videos go everywhere.
When I mean, if they come at you and with maybe an aggressive tone, or maybe
negativity. I got you.
Yeah. Is there anything, if you see someone who is clearly agitated, do you have a method to tone that down?
I do, actually. And this is not some self-serving answer. I actually said this in one of my church sermons just a month ago, so you can rewind and find it. Usually when I'm in a restaurant, I can tell very quickly. It's very rare that I ever go to a restaurant with at least somebody's not there for or against. Most of the time it's for, and that's cool. But I can tell when people are extraordinarily agitated, and sometimes they will let me know that they're extraordinarily agitated. I'll see them looking at their phone, or I'll see me on their phone. You know, you can just tell that they're disgusted. And if they don't want to engage me in a conversation, because if they're disgusted, I'm not going to walk over and be like, hey guys, I'm Pastor Greg Locke, what's up? You know, I'm not going to do that. But I'll tell you what I will do. I'll always pay for their meal without them knowing it, and I walk out. And let's just leave it at that. I just walk out. Let's pay for their meal. I leave. I know they were disgusted. I know they hated me, but maybe, just maybe, I could give them some glimmer of hope that I'm really not that big of a jerk, and I really would probably reach out and help them. So in our community, we have a very fast growing community. You either really love our church or you really hate our church. But the only reason people hate our church is because of probably our Facebook videos, but nobody that's ever actually met me or knows what our church does in the community, nobody could ever have any disparaging words to say against our church, or really for me, because we bend over backwards to be extraordinarily kind to folks. And so I guess my default mechanism on negativity is I just try to help them, just try to bless them and walk out. But most of the time it's good. But people are like, hey, we watch your videos. And it makes me uncomfortable. I'm like, hey, yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. You know, just I'm just not a talker without a microphone in front of my face. Just not who
Okay. I at least can be happy to say that we have our little support team, Charis and I, and they jumped in on something we that came up earlier. The request has been sent for a debate. We will wait until we have a response.
Sure.
If we do get a response
That was
while we're still
fast.
talking, I'll let you know. But you touched on Trump as well. One of the people that I greatly admire and I think he was a big part in what I do on Twitter and now on YouTube, and together with Charis is Aaron Ra. I don't know if you are familiar with that name.
I don't think so.
Aaron Ra, he's quite a vocal atheist. I think you might want to
I may have
Google
seen
him.
some of his stuff. I'll check him out. How do you spell that last name?
It's just one name.
Oh,
Raon Ra.
gotcha.
And he
I got you.
recently changed his legal name into that.
Okay.
And he's quite vocal. He also has an educational channel on YouTube, which I think is great. He supplies homeschooling videos that people can use, people who homeschool. But next year he's running for office in Texas, and I think you and I both know that it would be easier for a Satanist to run for public office than it would be for an atheist.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that issue? What do you think about an atheist in office? Do you think they would be would be worse than anyone else? And if you do,
Sure.
why?
I don't think they would be worse than anyone else. I mean, at the end of the day, people need to understand, I don't believe in a theocracy of the Old Testament. I mean, I know God's not going to be our president. And so, you know, there's no way around the fact, from my standpoint, from a biblical standpoint, the king's heart is in the hand of the Lord. He raises some up, he puts some down. Even throughout the Old Testament, God raised up people that didn't necessarily believe in his work or his word, for that matter, and still used them. He was still allowing them to get into office. And so who am I to say that, you know, this guy couldn't get into office? I mean, if he's got some good issues, that's the point of the nation, driving the nation in the right direction. I know when I pray for revival and a spiritual awakening and, you know, say, in God we trust, and I do my little ranting videos, at the end of the day, I know that this is not going to be a nation that is governed by the church. It's never intended to be governed by the church. I understand that. So an atheist running for office, if the guy's got good points, if he's going to help people and be a true public servant to the people, you know, who am I to say that, you know,
I think there's probably a large number of atheists who could just burst into tears crying a sigh of relief at hearing you say that.
Right. Right. I mean, I don't know people's, first of all, I don't know their spiritual condition. Secondarily, if their politics are right, I mean, again, this is not a theocracy. I'm well aware of that. I mean, do I want people in office personally that have, you know, biblical mandates? I want people that are going to be moral. Yeah, I want people that are going to do good for the country. But at the end of the day, I'm not voting in a pastor. If I was voting in a pastor, I'd run myself in 2020. I might do pretty good off Facebook. I don't know. But I'm not trying to vote in a pastor. I'm trying to vote in a president. And so, you know, atheist, non-atheist, is he a good politician? That's what I'm in it for.
Okay, but I come from Holland, and I don't know if you're aware, but Holland is, I think, over 80% atheist.
Oh, wow.
So it's not an issue here.
Right.
It's seldom that you hear religious people speak up. They do speak up.
Sure.
Of course, the ones that are left do speak up. But things like abortion, like
Sure.
LGBT, that's not an issue here. That's accepted.
Right.
So what astonishes me is how atheists are viewed in general in the US, and that was what brought me to maybe to the question.
Sure.
Because I think
no
a lot of Americans would disagree with you and would not have an atheist in holding public office, because people view them. I think they're the worst group ever in the
Sure.
U.S. Why do you think is that?
There's definitely a demonization, a characterization, a broad stroking of atheists and atheism. There's no doubt, especially if this guy's running in Texas. You know, he's going to have an uphill battle. I mean, there's no doubt about it. God bless Texas. You know, that's what we hear all the time. And so, yeah, he's going to have an uphill battle. That don't mean he can't win. Don't mean he can't do some type of good works. And yeah, I mean, some Americans may have issue with that. But again, I'm not voting in a pastoral staff. There have been many presidents that have done a good job that would not consider themselves a Bible believing evangelical Christian. Okay, well, whatever. As long as they're doing good for the nation, I'm not really worried about that. Do I want to vote in somebody that has my moral compass and my beliefs? Yeah, that would be great at the end of the day in a perfect society. But again, I worry about that from my standpoint during the millennial kingdom when Jesus takes over the whole thing. You know, I'm not going to vote him anyhow. He's just going to take over. But so to me, it's really a moot point. It's a non-issue. I mean, if an atheist wants to run for office, let them run for office. If they don't, they don't. And again, I'm not one of these guys that's going to get on the bandwagon and talk about how Christian Trump is, because I don't think he is. I think he wants to do some Christian things, and I think he wants to pander to the Christian audience, and I think he's done a lot of that with the evangelicals, even the people that I would hang with and run with. But at the end of the day, you will never hear me get up and talk about what a great, admirable Christian that Donald Trump is, because
I honestly think he kind of, I mean, apologies, but he kind of shames the name of Christianity if he claims to be a big Christian. Sure. The man I'm with, he is a Christian. I'm an atheist with a Christian. Mm-hmm. And wow. I personally don't think that Trump reflects very well on definitely most of the Christians that I know. I mean, when you think about Christianity, while white evangelicals might be in a minority now, Christians as a whole are still a vast majority of the country. And I know that they're not all like Trump.
Sure. No, you're right. You're right. I mean, it is I think he has surrounded himself with some very good, wise, what I would consider people that walk with the Lord. But he's got some people that are uber sketchy, that are spiritual advisors that I wouldn't walk across the street and have coffee with, that they call themselves these, you know, rock solid Christians. And, you know, I'm just not going to pay any homage to them, because I think they're speaking some nonsense into his ear. And so I think he needs a little humility in some areas. I do like the fact that he's so forceful. I mean, I got to be honest. I do like his punch backiness at times, but
he has alternate humility. Alternate humility.
Somebody said he could write the book on humility and how I obtained it. And so I do think he needs a little better dose, and who knows, maybe he'll have me come to the White House and pray sometime. I don't know. I'd be honored to do it, but I'd have a few things to tell, you know, Mr. President. And so, you know, again, circling the wagons, coming back to this guy here, that's going to run, this atheist, you know, that's on him. I wish him the best, but from a biblical standpoint, who am I to say if a guy can or can't run for office just because he does or doesn't believe in God? We're never going to be a theocratic society. So that's that simple, really. Hope that answers the question.
I think that if you were to Google Aaron Ra or even meet him, I have never met him because I'm in Holland. I'm a little bit out of his way, I think.
Yeah.
Although he has visited twice here, but I spoke to him on the phone 2 times, I think, quite long phone calls. He is one of the most gentle and civil people I've ever met. So
well, I think
people who would at least take the time to get to know him would think a lot different. But
I have yet to see his.
Go ahead.
I have yet to see his gentle side, but I don't know him. So,
all right. Put it this way: I would be quicker to vote for him than I would somebody like Ted Cruz. That much I can promise you.
Well, if you know that he is
Okay.
quite active in Texas to get better textbooks, you might disagree, because I know that you wouldn't agree with him on I think science questions.
Right. Sure.
So, but there's another question that I'd like to ask, because as I said, a couple of viewers, I said, yeah, viewers and people that follow me on Twitter asked
Sure.
the questions. If an angry atheist would come at you, do you think you would have to counter that with equal anger, or do you have? What would you do in that setting?
It's a very good question, because it's just happened to us just this past weekend, Friday night. Somebody inboxed us and just said, "Hey, you're in it for the money. I don't even believe in God, and you're a shyster, and you're no better than, Benny Hinn or whatever." And he used all these, expletives and things. And when I first read that, I'm like, "Oh, there's that money business again." And this guy doesn't even believe in God. Who does he think he is? That's my first mechanism in my mind. I'm thinking, why do these people think this way? And he's just, F this as far as God and the Bible is concerned. So I told Ty, who you spoke to, I said, let me respond to this one myself. And so I just sent back, within like just a few minutes, I sent back and I said, something to the effect of, "Hey, listen, I want you to know that our church is not in it for the money, but we do give a lot of money away. And if you ever fall on hard times, why don't you come to one of our services and talk with me or one of our staff members, and we'll be glad to help you." And I thought, man, what's this guy going to say? And he came back with, "You know what? That is not what I expected." That was very powerful. That was very humble. And I may visit sometime even. And I said, "You know what? If you never come to our service, you don't have to come here to be preached." I said, "That's fine if you're uncomfortable." I said, "Let's meet at Panera. Let's meet at Dunkin'." He lives about an hour away. I said, we'll meet at Starbucks. We'll talk. I'll answer your questions. I may not have all the answers. And so it's interesting you asked that, because it just happened. And so, sometimes my mechanism is, "Oh, my back's against the rope. My back's against the rope. I want to come out punching." But sometimes
I think we've all experienced that
Yes.
flight or fight mentality, and that's really what it comes down to. I mean, people, no matter their ideology, we're all, like you said, we're all still people.
Yep.
We have the same basic emotions across the board. We're all, hashtag triggered by this or that. And
Exactly.
that can elicit different responses, flight or fight. That's very common. And any one of us, the best of us, can find ourselves in that mentality and punching at people that we would not normally punch at.
Sure. Yeah, I've been married long enough to know that humility always disarms the argument.
Not when you're with an abuser; it only inflames
Yes.
it there. But I think a lot of people who would listen to this talk would be able to relate. Sometimes excessive humility, meaning submission here, would just give an abuser kind of the upper hand.
More
Not
fuel
kind
to the
of,
fire.
just
Yeah.
right.
For the record, I think 3 women in the chat have stated that they suffered from abuse, directly or indirectly from the church. So
And it's interesting because I just finished yesterday, our 4 services this weekend. I just finished a whole month and a half series in 2 Peter on beware of wolves. And I expose all that foolishness, all that nonsense. I talked about the false teachers and, those that say one thing, but then they're immoral and ungodly in their lifestyle in another way. And so it's funny that you talk about that, because I talked through a lot of that spiritual abuse over the last month and a half. And really, I think gave some liberty and some help to a lot of people in our church that have come up in that denominational bondage, that religious bondage, which I'm very much against, and I'm not religious. I know that sounds very cliche. I am very much against dead, man-made rules, bondage, legalism, and religion. Very much against that.
Well, I think a lot of Christians would disagree that religion is synonymous with dead and man-made. As an atheist, I would say that it's all man-made, but I'm not talking about atheists here.
No, I got you.
But when the Bible says, it differentiates between false religion and true religion.
True religion.
And so I'm thinking that, you know, not everything called religious should be viewed in a bad light from the standpoint of a Christian.
Sure, sure. Because Jesus was very plain, or through James, saying, hey, pure religion and undefiled is to visit the widows and the orphans and the fatherless. And so to us, that would be single parents, you know, the homeless, the addicted, helping people. That's what real religion leads to. But again, I hate the word religion because it's got such nasty connotations in the day and age in which we live.
Yeah, it's why a lot of atheists actually don't like the word atheism, because of the connotations. A lot of us go by just non-religious or secular or humanist, or there are a lot of names that many of us prefer to use because, like you guys with the word religious, many of us really dislike the word atheist.
Sure, that makes sense. I got it. It's like, you know, for years when I was a younger preacher, I loved the word fundamentalist. I don't use the word fundamentalist a whole lot anymore. I'm not wrapping a towel around my head and blowing people up, you know, and so I want to be careful about fundamentalist, you know, that terminology. And so, so everybody's got their radical groups, okay? I'm sure there's radical atheism, there's radical evangelical Christians, and there's people that make us all look bad from every front. There is no doubt about that. But I want to be a true, pure, you know, best I can, you know, to my knowledge, representation of Christ and his teachings. And so we would have to agree to disagree on a number of those. But I really do think that conversations like this help kind of get the ball down the court. You guys aren't jerks. I'm not a jerk. We're getting along. We've talked for an hour. We've had a good time. Hey, we can do it again. You know, I enjoy it. I really do. I'm not all anxious and all pent up. I don't want to get off here and go do a video. Oh, these atheists are against me. Oh, spiritual persecution. You know, I'm not, you guys have been great. You know, it's been fun. You know, I've not looked at the comments, so I don't know what the followers are thinking about it, but it really has been intriguing to me. I like this.
I think a lot of the tensions between the religious of all stripes, of all religions, and non-religious comes down to basically tribalism, because we all identify with our own tribe, basically, and other tribes we're kind of at enmity with, and we kind of accidentally dehumanize members of the other tribe, so to speak.
Sure.
We see them as just this, as them, as other, and I think for everybody's sake, we need to stop doing that. I think that's really causing a lot of unnecessary conflicts, and that's kind of what we're about here on this channel.
Sure, sure. The media has been very good at painting the us and them mentality, and that's caused a lot of division, not just in America, but around the world. And I can't say that I've not contributed to some of that in some ways. And so that's why there have been times I've pulled videos, I've changed, and I'm still learning. This thing blew up in my face 2 or 3 years ago, and it's the biggest tiger by the tail that I've ever had. I mean, it's a lot of responsibility. And so I'm just I'm really figuring this thing out as I move forward, as I grow, as I get older, as I deepen, as I mature, and as my wife is like, wait, change that. Don't say stupid stuff. You know, or my staff's like, get rid of that video. And so I'm growing through this. I really am learning, and I've got a lot to learn, and probably more
There's
so
a pertinent,
on Twitter.
sorry about that.
No, you're fine.
There's a relevant question to that, to this particular line of question. There's somebody in the comments saying, would he talk to pastors at those churches who would use "obey your husband" and well, they're saying, would you talk to the pastors who are speaking to victims of spousal abuse, spiritual abuse, and would you talk to those pastors who are using that "obey your husband" club to club them over the heads with it and basically keep them in that situation?
Oh yes, yeah, very much so.
I've been there.
Yes.
There's a video that you can look at. It's my original Talk with Peter, and I talk about the abuse that I experienced, and I'm by no means an isolated case. There are tons of us out there, tons and tons and tons, and so many of us, men and women, are accustomed to these pastors using certain verses in their full context to keep us in oppression. And the person in the comments is wondering, would you talk to those pastors and help to speak out, when you address,
Sure.
specific people and where they're going wrong, would you also address them specifically, name them, and
Yeah.
say where they're going wrong?
I have, and I do, and I will, because I do preach at a lot of pastors, fellowships, and conferences and things. And sometimes it's a set, schedule, or it's a set, subject matter. But yeah, I've called that out many
Right.
times. Matter of fact, it's interesting. If you read like the book of Ezekiel, for example, you have a
Mhm.
prophet, and almost entirely the book of Ezekiel is Ezekiel calling out the shameful practices of the shepherds, You've led the people astray. You've beat the people into bondage. You've beat them into submission. You are a crooked shepherd. You have let the wolves come in, whatever, yada, yada. And so, yes, very much so, because I think sometimes, we could say it's within the full context, but sometimes preachers have this uncanny ability of making you think it's the Bible's context when it's their generational context. It's just how they grew up. And they can read into the Bible, rather than exegesis, it's eisegesis. They're reading stuff into
Right.
the text that's not there, rather than just plainly reading out what is there. And there's been many times, even in our own church context, because of the clientele of people that do come to our church, and they are so broken, and homes are such a mismanaged wreck, and the divorce rate in our area, that there's been times I said, listen, you got to get out of this situation. You cannot stay in this abusive situation. You cannot deal with this addiction and this thievery and this, this abuse, verbal, mental, whatever it is, physical. You can't stay there. You just can't. And so, I can't speak for the other pastors, but I can speak for me and the people that I'm accountable for. And I'm not going to have them lay around in that nonsense, because they're hurt, they're broken, and they're being far too, taken advantage of. And so whoever it is there in the comments, you can know of assured fact, as scathingly as I can be against things that I don't like, I give preachers a very hard time, because preachers, just like Second Peter said, they've given us all the black eye. The bad apples in the bunch, the Benny Hinn's, the crooks on TV, the abusers, these guys, these Jesse Duplantis and all these bunch of crazy people that have these going to heaven visions and all this bunch of mess. Man, I washed my hands and dusted off the dust from my feet a long time ago for those people. I have no qualms about calling out their foolishness whatsoever. And so I give them just as hard a time as I do everybody else. So people need to know that about Greg Locke. I'm not going to give these preachers a pass just because they got pastor before their name, because some of them are crooks and they need to go mop floors somewhere.
Well, let me
Can,
throw just a random question at you, just for fun.
wait a minute.
Okay.
I have one question
Okay.
should the answer is should be very short.
Okay.
The talk I had with Charis, she just mentioned, was by far the most difficult talk I ever had with anyone.
I bet.
Certain events led up to that. I think the entire talk we had that day was 7 hours.
Oh, wow.
2 hours of that were the actual live talk. It was, I think, very tough on Charis. It was tough on me as well, because, as I said, it was the most. It made the most impact of all the talks that I've done, and I think that might include my private life. If I link you to that talk, would you watch it, and would you give a response to that? And there's no need to do it in a comment, but
Sure.
let us know what you think, because that talk still is at the top of my playlist, because I put it there because I think it's one of the most important things that I have
Sure.
on what's now our channel. Because people need to learn from that talk, and I'm not that coherent, I think, in it. I listened back a couple of times, so I really had a tough time with that. But I would really appreciate it if you would take the time and watch that.
Can you send it to me a DM on just
Yeah,
direct
sure,
message? Yeah,
sure.
send it to me.
I'll send you a link in DM, no problem. So
I'm
I
gonna
would
be on
really
on the road tomorrow, traveling to Virginia, and I got 8 hours, so I can listen to it while I'm driving. That'd be great.
that would be great. That would be great. And as I said, a response, you can do that in private. You can do that in public.
Okay.
That's up to you.
Okay, great.
Okay, Charis, go ahead.
to lighten things up just a little bit, gonna throw a random question at you. It's completely unrelated to anything we've spoken about, but I like to ask Christians this because it's fun, and I have my own answer to it.
Sure.
If you were to choose any object that you think would most accurately depict the concept of the Trinity, what would it be?
The concept of the Trinity.
Yeah.
I would probably, everybody likes to use the egg, but I don't use the egg very much. I would probably say a fan, because you have 3 blades, but when you turn them on, they're all individual blades, but when you turn them on, they all operate as one. They have the same function, but they are each an individual unique blade. So if I had to pick an object, that would be the object, I suppose, that I would pick. And
my fan has 5 blades.
Well, a 3-bladed fan. That's my object, a 3-bladed fan. I've heard people use, an ink pen, because it's got the outer shell and the inner core and the writing utensil.
I like the pretzel.
I've heard the pretzel. Yep, I've heard all different ones. And so, I mean, I've got, from the Christian standpoint, the Trinity is under a major attack these days in some areas where I don't think it needs to be. But I've got a pretty solid belief about the Trinity. But that'd be the one that I would choose. The 3-bladed fan, may I say?
Right. To kind of jump topics yet again, I do this a lot. It's just me. I'm going to move to science just a little bit, not specific theories, not specific teachings, just science in general. When you hear science proving something correct in the Bible, how does that make you feel?
Science proving something correct. I don't know that it makes me really feel anyway. I mean, from my vantage point, I think the Bible's pretty justified regardless if science has backed it up or not. But I do think that true science and the Bible do mesh very, very well. I mean, we would scientifically disagree on a lot of things, I'm sure, but I just got through recently doing a series at our church on Wednesday night on, Bible contradictions, the myth of what I call Bible contradictions. And a lot of it had some scientific aspects in it. So, I mean, I don't think I get some elated experience or whatever, but I do think that science and the Bible match a whole lot more than people want to imagine them to.
So then when science and the Bible do not match, how does your, I don't want to use the word attitude right here, but I don't have a fitting synonym on hand at the moment, so it's going to sound harsher than I intend. How does your attitude towards science maybe change in that moment when it does contradict what the Bible's saying? And I'm not using attitude here to be abrasive. Okay.
And I'm not anti-science, that's for sure. I'm not against science. I guess, if I come to some level of difficulty where to me it seems like, wow, science is really throwing me a whammy here, I just put on an extra few cups of coffee and get my nose in the book and then the Bible and try to figure it out. Try to balance it out in my mind and see, is there really a contradiction here? Is there really a problem? So really, all of it, I think, is going to come from where are we starting this conversation, right? What is your worldview? What is my worldview? Because
and you can't do that without a few cups of coffee.
There you go. There is no doubt about that. And so that's going to determine where we end up in the conversation. What is
the coffee?
Science? Well, yeah, that too. The science of coffee. Maybe that's our next talk we need to have.
Yes.
It is very scientific to my body. I can promise you that.
How many times during the course of a show do you have to jump up and go to the bathroom?
And ironically enough, I hadn't drunk coffee one single time during this whole time together. So, but I promise I will before I go to bed.
I have this big tall glass of Monster.
In a
well,
coffee.
it was right. Well,
so I'm the only coffee lover here that actually has coffee during the
apparently
talk.
So, yeah, apparently so. Man.
Well, today you are. My table right here is a mess. I have one glass for water, one glass that is an empty glass of coffee, cup of coffee, and then one glass that is full of Monster. Because with my history, I've extremely abused history, and now we're bringing Pastor Greg Locke on. So I needed some distractions, so I figured a caffeine high would just do.
There you go. So see there, regardless if I believe and you don't believe, we both agree on the fact that coffee is marvelous to the world. See?
I think all three of us, because all I drink
Yes.
is coffee. So
Well, there we go. See, so
should we ever meet, we can at least go to Starbucks or something like
yes,
that.
we have some
I
commonality.
yes, at least we would have common ground. So coffee grounds.
Coffee grounds. That's a nice little
Yeah,
pun there. Common ground.
yeah, yeah. Well, humor is a little bit difficult still for me because English is my third language. So, but I'm catching up, and Charis is tutoring me on that, and she's good at it. I have
Oh,
a question.
the things I accidentally say that mean something extremely inappropriate in another country. Ah,
Oh
he's
yes.
tutoring me on things not to say.
Well, English is universal, except it isn't, because
Yes, exactly.
the same words mean completely different things in different countries, and that can be
Oh,
Yeah.
quite humorous.
I just recently told somebody, "You got spunk, kid. You got spunk," and then the UK person, no, he was German. He's like,
not good, huh?
not good.
Yeah, I've preached many places around the world, and I've been embarrassed a few times, and they're like, "Well, that doesn't quite mean what it means in the South."
You keep saying that word. I do not think you mean what it thinks. What I do not think. Oh my gosh.
Especially in Australia. Now, there was a lot of change in Australia. I had a lot of words I had to
I
Oh
can't
yeah,
convert.
even talk.
yeah.
So,
Oh yeah.
but
I can't
I
even
I
talk.
I have a friend in Australia, and I told her I was rooting for her, and apparently that's quite different. Do you know the meaning by, by, by any chance?
I
I would
don't, but
respond, but
I
I
can
can't even
imagine.
speak apparently.
Yeah.
So
Well, see, I did not
Oh,
realize when I first went to Australia, because I was a fan of that silly crocodile hunter guy for all of those years. And I didn't realize that some of the words that he used were apparently rather expressive in the Australian culture. And so I used one of them one night while I was preaching. And it got rather quiet very, very quickly. Halfway
yeah.
through my message, instead of saying, "Can I get an amen?" I said, "Can I get a crikey?" And did not quite realize what that meant in Australia, but they let me know when it was all done.
Well,
oh no, I have to Google that.
I wouldn't
Hold on.
I wouldn't use rooting as well, because in America it's quite common. I'm rooting for you.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
In Australia, it means having wild sex with a woman. So um,
Yay.
Yeah, totally
you
different
should be careful.
context. Yeah, big time.
You should be careful there. I have a question, because I as I said, I watched the other interviews. Karis and I both watched the interviews to try at least come up with some interesting questions. But there was a question that I saw wasn't quite answered, because you made a statement, and
Sure.
that wasn't followed up. That was in the interview with the guy with the aquarium. I don't remember his name, but
Uh-huh.
um, you said if there were mistakes in the Bible, it would shake your belief. If you found out that there really were mistakes in the Bible, it would shake your belief. At least you said that in that particular video.
Sure.
Um, would you say that science hasn't pointed out errors in the Bible
Well,
yet?
I think they've definitely pointed them out. I just don't think they've been as demonstratively errors or contradictions. Just like this series, I mean, we went very, very deep, and I really uncovered. And it took me a little while. There was a few times I was like, wow, I really need to check this out. And I had to do some deep study, and I didn't study myself out of it. But once I was able to give the explanation and sit on the stage and explain it to the people, it made so much more sense to me. And so, yeah, I mean, it would, if I could come upon a legitimate contradiction where the Bible was like glaringly in error, and it wasn't just some, little contextual gymnastics that somebody was just mad about, yeah, then it would bother me. I mean, it would bother me to the point where I would study a whole lot more than I've been studying. And although science and the Bible are going to disagree in some areas, I haven't seen anything that's going to make my faith be shaken or walk away from God or walk away from the Bible, because I really think it can be reconciled. And so, go ahead.
I'm sorry. So I guess if you say if there was an error in the Bible, it would really make you, just kind of consider things and do more research and just look at stuff. And you said
sure.
there
I mean, there
are
are
things that
some things that are very difficult to explain. There are some seeming contradictions, but again, once I began to study them and I began to get into them, okay, what's this mean? What's this mean? And kind of compare the two passages that are in seeming contradiction to each other.
Well,
really,
I'm not really talking about contradictions here necessarily. I'm talking about more, I am talking about science.
Sure.
And I'm wondering, what would it take, what type of sources would you consider valid? Basically, what would it take to convince Pastor Greg Locke that science might have a point in one area or another? What kind of sources?
Sure.
How do you determine if an expert is actually being an expert, or if they are, in your opinion, working more towards propaganda?
Well, I think everybody has a position that they work from. And again, I think a lot of it's going to have to do, for example, if we were going to talk science in regards to evolution, I'd be like, whoa, wait a minute. That is a faith issue as much as my creationism is a faith issue, because we weren't there. It wasn't observable. Nobody was there for a big bang, or nobody was there for a creation when God said, let there be light. And so, we could talk about that till the cows come home. But if somebody came to me and said, okay, here's 3 areas where the Bible glaringly contradicts the truth of science, I would really like to see what those glaring areas are, because I don't think the Bible glaringly contradicts science. I think it complements science and, weather patterns and this, that, and the other. So nobody's ever really just set me down and said, okay, here's 3, here's 5, here's 10 things the Bible says, and it is way against science.
It would be interesting to have a talk just to present a few things, to have you give your thoughts on those particular.
I mean, that'd be a good program.
I think if the person that I chose to debate you are, I would suggest, if that happens, I would suggest not to take the debate format, because I think the debate format is
it's a little bit more antagonistic, and
it's useless, because the one winning the debate is the better debater, not necessarily the person with the better facts and the better precision. So I would opt for more a conversation style
discussion. Yeah, I'd be great with that.
So if he accepts, and as I said, we have sent out an invite. If he accepts, I think that'll be addressed.
Jackson is saying I didn't get a DM. Jackson, we weren't talking to you.
Yes, I was talking to him, because I sent him a DM.
Oh, I'm being a jerk right now.
Awesome.
Okay. Yeah, he got the DM and he answered.
Well, yeah, just keep in touch with me on that. And I mean, like I said, I'll be glad to help.
Well, I think it would make for an interesting conversation. As I said, you're both you can both be fired up, and but I can also say that you're both decent people and capable of having a civil conversation, and I think that's important. And I am correct that you are a young Earth creationist? Am I right?
Yes. Well.
Okay.
Kind of.
Kind of.
What do you consider young? What do you consider young?
Yeah, I mean, I am a young Earth creationist, but I do believe that, God didn't make infants when he made Adam and Eve. He made them fully grown adults. And so I believe.
Did they have belly buttons?
Did they have belly buttons? Probably not. But I do believe the Earth was made with a major maturation process. And so I don't think he made an infant Earth. I believe he made a very mature Earth. But
all the light being already in place and everything like that.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I believe everything was
exactly
hung where it needed to be hung. So, but yeah, as far as age, beliefs, I believe that Earth's 6,000 years old, but it's got a lot of age in it. So yeah, I mean, that'd be a cool conversation. I mean, I know you had Kent Hovind on. I've known Kent for years. I hadn't seen him in years, but I listened to a little bit of that just a couple of weeks ago. And so he's kind of a fascinating guy. I'm fixing to be speaking to the staff at Answers in Genesis. And so, and I've never met them before. This will be the first time. So be interesting. I really do like talking to both sides of the aisle. I really do.
Kent Hovind is actually responsible for us having this talk right now, because if it wasn't for Kent Hovind, I wouldn't be on Twitter in the first place, because I just stumbled on his video, 100 Reasons Why Evolution is Stupid. And I started watching that, and my jaw dropped and made a dent in the coffee table.
Right.
So I got hooked. I really got hooked on him, and I still follow him to this day. I watch every video he puts out.
Sure.
I have watched everything he ever put out. So all his seminars.
That's a lot.
Yeah, I think the seminars only is 18 hours. Then he has additional seminars to that. So I watched pretty much everything and checked if he was correct, yes or no.
Now, from that, let me just ask you this from that standpoint. I know I've been here a little longer, but I've really been having a good time. So in a minute I have to go, but I do want to ask you a question. So after watching all of that, I know it's not going to change one way or the other. So what do you think about Kent as a person? What do you think about his delivery? I mean, he's a pretty genius guy. He could talk circles around me when it comes to science. I could kind of hold my own on the Bible side of it. But so what did you think going into all of that? You say your jaw dropped.
Yeah, okay.
That
sure.
in disbelief or in like, wow, this guy's kind of cool.
When it comes to speaking, I think he's a genius.
Yeah.
He can capture his audience. What he lacks is what I lack, and that's humor, because he's using jokes.
He's very dry.
No, but he's using the same joke for 10 years, and I think that after 10 years, people already have heard them, and he should get some ghostwriter write him a little bit better material, I think.
Yeah, but Ray Comfort does the same thing.
Yeah,
yes, he does.
Yeah, but
I mean, it's not the crocoduck with Kirk; it's the banana with Ray, and it's just, come on, guys, really?
Yeah. So. But as a speaker, he's a genius. He knows how to capture the people. I also think they should rename the Gish Gallop in the Hovind Gallop, because no one can get as many topics out in as short a time as Hovind can.
Right.
So in a debate setting, he'll always win. Because
actually, I think Carl Kirby might be able to.
Maybe, but yeah, Hovind is good at it as well. When it comes to science, I think he needs to learn where he needs to get his science from, because if you watch his videos, all his sources are newspapers, National Geographic, you name it. I have yet to come up with him citing a scientific paper. He hasn't done that once in all of the hours that I've watched. He hasn't come up with one scientific source that's actually a scientific source. And most of what he presents is demonstrably untrue.
To be fair, Jason Lyle is an actual scientific source. It's just that he
yes,
does this weird. What's that?
He's not one of Hovind's. He's not one of Hovind's.
Okay.
He's listening. So, he knows.
Yeah. So
he doesn't source
as sorry, Charis?
He doesn't source Jason Lyle?
No.
That's surprising.
Yes.
Okay.
I think Jason Lyle is from AIG. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think Hovind and AIG aren't on the right footing.
They're not on good speaking terms.
No, I don't think so.
That debacle lately, so I'm a little bit. I need to update my my info.
But yeah, and as a person, I think he's a likable person, but I don't know him privately. So
sure.
I have met someone who was very likable, my own father, who was an animal towards his wife and me. So that doesn't say much about the person. So,
My
but yeah,
ex-husband.
yeah. So, but the public figure Kent Hovind, yeah, I enjoyed talking to him. We had a good conversation, and we're up to having another one. We're changing our format soon, where will have video. So I'll scare you to death with my looks,
That's
because
okay.
because all this time you've been talking to a hillbilly that was dropped in the wrong country, I think. But um, if we have that, I'm going to send out a second invitation, because he expressed the feeling that he would like to do more talks. So I'd love to take him up on that, and I'll give you the same invitation when we have video.
Yeah.
I'd like to have you back, and maybe have some different topics we can touch on, because I'm not sure how are you for time, because we extended the hour that you promised.
Yeah. I did extend it.
A
I
lot.
have enjoyed it, but I do need to kind of get going here. So I put a little message out at 6:30 and told the folks I'd be late, so that's all good. So I'm
Okay.
fine. But yeah, I probably need to roll because I only had an hour. But hey, I've enjoyed it. So it's my schedule, so I've been able to move it around. So it's okay. I just really appreciate you having me. I've enjoyed it. I really have. It's been
Okay.
good.
Charis, is there a question we haven't asked that we should ask as a last question before we end the conversation?
No, I think we're fine. I mean, if we're going to be doing more shows, and I mean, we can just stick him in there. He tends to answer questions before I've asked them anyway, so.
It has happened. We had a couple of questions that were answered before we could get to asking them. So, well, at least from our point of view, that should be a good thing.
Sure.
But yeah, I really enjoyed the conversation, and I would love to have you back at some point. Hopefully, we'll have video as well. And so, and I'd like to thank the people in the chat who have been watching. A couple of people that are regularly there. I might want to point you at one of the people in the chat, actually, because I'm a huge fan of him. He's become a friend lately. Have you heard of the Apologia channel?
I don't think so. Apologia.
I'll
Okay.
send.
Yeah, send me the link.
I'll
That'd be fine. Yeah, please.
I'll send you a link. Apologia is actually Paul. He's from Canada. He is a former young Earth creationist who started checking Ken Ham's claims, and that actually made him an atheist.
Wow.
And so now what he does is he watches Answers in Genesis closely. He watches Eric Hovind closely, and he makes response videos to that. So I would love to send you a link to his channel, and maybe you can let him know what you think of what he does, because he references to all of the science that he uses. And for me, at least, he came up with the most important link that I use on Twitter, and that's I'll link you to that one as well. Because you might have seen the video is Genesis History, the movie or documentary or whatever you.
Yeah, just the preview. I've not seen the actual movie.
Okay, are you familiar with one of the people who was in there, Todd Wood?
I don't think so.
Todd Wood is I think he works for Answers in Genesis off and on. I don't think that he's a regular employee or something, but he does work for Answers in Genesis. He has a blog where he puts out his stuff, and what Paul found was a piece of his on evolution, where he pretty much states that everything is true. There are no problems with evolution. And at the end, he just says, well, I'm a Bible believer, so I have to stick with the Bible, knowing that I'm going against all the facts that I'm aware of. So I'll link you to that as well. And well, maybe we can talk about stuff like that in another video. But I would at least like you to see that, and the videos that Paul made.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Okay. So I would like to conclude. Thanks everyone in the chat. If you could just hang on till we go offline. I would like to thank you for this talk. I very much enjoyed it, and I'll be looking forward to maybe a next talk.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I look forward to it.
Charis?
Yes, we do.
Last words?
No, we need to let him go. So I'll just say thank you for coming on. It has been a pleasure, and looking forward to the next one.
Thank you very much. And I like that name.
Okay.
You don't hear that name Charis very often, but I do like it. So
Thank you, sir.
Okay. So thanks everyone, and see you all next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.